Goldman Sachs is rearing its head in this Democratic primary, and a new study may reveal the benefits of universal basic income.
Team Rising is here to weigh in on all of this. Michael Starr-Hopkins is Democratic strategist, and Marshall Kosloff is a media analyst. Gentlemen, great to have you.
Thanks.
Good to see you guys. All right, so interesting new article here from the Washington Post. Basically, Goldman Sachs, they've launched this thing, a small business initiative. But the more important thing is they're holding candidate forums all across some of these early states, and it's headed by a lobbyist for the financial industry. And what those lobbyists are doing are basically luring candidates like Kamala Harris into these presidential forums. So, I mean, Michael, it's just funny because, good rebrand for them, right? Yeah. 10,000 small businesses, sure, even though you're a massive multinational financial conglomerate. But, I mean, it's not very wise for candidates to be going to these things in the year 2019.
I was just going to say, I don't know what candidates are really going to these things and really want to have that photo op.
The desperate ones. That's
the ones who just need somewhere to be, have a hole in their schedule. Goldman is notorious for kind of, being the villain of the financial industry. So, any candidate that really shows up there is kind of clutching at straws and doesn't really know where the base of the party's
I do think it shares a more interesting thing. I've talked about this on the show earlier. You see Goldman, you see Business Roundtable, and all these other massive lobbying organizations for financial companies. They're like, listen, we get it. Like, class war, it's out of control. Like, here is our ethical corporatism that they're trying to put forward. I mean, what do you think of that, Marshall? And like how it all comes together in the primary?
I mean, it's sort of funny because this is peak corporatism, right?
Yeah, right.
Think like, hey, look, so people don't like the car.
Yeah.
So what we should probably do here is slap a new coat of paint on it, give it a new name, and then basically people will be down for the current system, right? It once again, it just shows this case of I don't think people are actually getting it. I think that people are looking, and this is the problem of all these narratives, right? People are sort of thinking capitalism has a branding problem. So what we need to use is new names like common capitalism. Pro-fun capitalism small business week hashtag. It's missing the point. That's why we're dunking on it.
And when Goldman talks about small businesses, they're not talking about the mom and pop bookstore that has been open for 50 years. They're talking about a company worth $50 million.
But even if they are talking about that mom and pop bookstore, it's all just window dressing. It's all just to whitewash their image and try to improve their brand. I mean, I do think there is somewhat of a recognition among the ruling class that things have gone a little too far.
Absolutely.
Right? So they want to at least have some appearance of some window dressing, some maybe we'd support a half a penny wealth tax.
Right.
There is a little bit of that thinking, but I think they have no idea how deep the anger goes. And we talk about it all the time here. 70% of Americans are screw all of you. I mean, that is the nature of the country right now. That's why we have Trump. That's why you see the energy behind, with young people, especially behind Bernie Sanders. And they just can't wrap their head around it, which is why elites in the Democratic Party have pushed forward Deval Patrick, right, who is a capitalist to the core.
He's he works at Bain Capital.
AmeriQuest, which is the worst of the subprime mortgage lenders, right? You have Bloomberg, as we were talking about in an earlier segment, again, being sort of recruited into this race like some billionaire is the guy that we need to save us. They do not fundamentally understand where the country is at.
Well, to defend Michael Bloomberg for a second, I think that there's several different responses to this, right? One is obviously, let's not repaint the car and basically act like we're making changes here. Two is don't recruit Deval Patrick. But I think Michael Bloomberg is a third response, which is actually kind of a reasonable response, which once again, he supports wealth taxes. He actually has a record as a legitimate mayor who presided over a massive city that had a lot of these sort of problems here. So I don't think people are expecting sort of the elite of the Democratic Party to sit down and shut up forever. But I think what the expectation has to be is that they will listen and really realize what people are saying. And I think Michael Bloomberg is probably the best case scenario of what a response would look like.
And I think Bloomberg has been kind of painted in a bad light in terms of how Democrats have attacked him, because they've attacked him as this billionaire, this evil guy. I mean, Bloomberg was a middle-class kid who created a company, and once he became a billionaire, he's used a lot of that money to fund things like gun control and climate change and affordable housing.
He also backed George W. Bush. He also
Yeah.
is the most right-wing neocon, certainly, of the Democrats. I mean, not only did he support the Iraq War, but he bought into this nonsense about Saddam was part of 9/11. I mean, he is all the way there on regime change.
For sure.
This actually gets to a point I've been wanting to make now for a while, which is that I think part of the issue is that when Bernie and Warren just attacked Bloomberg for just being a billionaire,
Exactly.
I don't think that that's the right response.
Totally
It should be what I was talking about earlier. Bloomberg is the one who made Manhattan unlivable for normal people, right? Bloomberg is the one who is wholly in the pocket of the Chinese whenever it comes to the financial system. Bloomberg made his money by making financial transaction more efficient. We should talk more about what type of billionaire is bad rather than just like
All
being
billionaires.
billionaire is bad. And then that's
I'm not
kind
sure
of what
about
I get
that,
at.
but
Yeah.
I will say I think the case that's being made of he's trying to buy the election is a pretty compelling one.
I do think
mean,
that-
that's like
absolutely.
pretty
Yeah,
simple.
that
It's
does
cut
show,
and dry
like,
and doesn't
straight
get you
up.
into China and foreign policy, whatever.
But
Like, he's trying to buy the
when
election.
people like Klobuchar attack him for saying for buying the election,
Right.
I mean, what's that really mean? He's not taking any donations.
Yeah.
He's saying, I made my money here, and now I'm going to invest it in my campaign. So that means he has no lobbyists trying to get to him, no special interests trying to get to him. I mean, isn't that exactly
Which is
kind of
exactly
what we
what
would
Trump
want?
said.
Yeah,
that's
that's
exactly.
exactly-
Trump-
But see, here's
Yeah.
the thing. But
when you
here's
compare him
the
to Trump,
problem
Trump's a
with that.
fraud.
I think that is the argument he's making, and I think it lands with some people. The problem is he has his own financial
Yes,
interests
right.
at stake. So he doesn't need anyone pressuring him. He comes by his corporatist views, honestly, by his own personal class
Yes.
and financial.
But how much more money is Bloomberg really going to, I mean, how much can you make? I mean, he's in
made
interest,
53
he's making
billion,
like
man.
$100 million a week in like interest. How much
like
more
I
rich
said-
can you get?
Yeah, but he does. I mean, look, this is a guy who said that Manhattan, when he was a mayor, was a luxury good. Like, this is his view, not of let's have affordable housing for people. And we talked also about stop and frisk and the disproportionate impact that had, of course, on African American residents and all people of color, lower income people in the city. Like, this was not a mayor for all. Yes, New York was prosperous for a certain set during his time, but if you talk to the working class of the city, I think you'll get a very different impression.
Yeah,
that goes to Sagar's point, which is that that's an attack. It's not about, that's not about him being a billionaire. He could have been a mere millionaire,
Right.
and you could have had those issues.
A lot of other New York
with his
mayors
mayors.
also did
Sure,
that.
sure.
Look at Bill de Blasio. He's poor as hell, but he's doing exactly the same thing. So it's like, there you
And
go.
everyone hates him too.
Yeah, yeah.
And he failed out of the race already,
that's
early and often.
Thank God.
Ran.
I know.
That was a gift for all of us.
There's also this new interesting research, though, that I wanted to talk about. NPR wrote it up. But this group called Give Directly has been piloting programs, specifically this one in rural Kenya, where they literally just give people money and then see what happens. And what they found initially is that families invested more in kids' education, their nutrition improved, their health outcomes improved. And what this particular study did is they looked, okay, well, if that's happening for people, what about inflationary effects? Like, is this a bad thing for other people in the community? What about ripple effects in terms of improving productivity for small businesses? Are more people getting hired because you've got more money flowing through the economy locally? And essentially they found that the inflationary effects were very small and the positive ripple effects were very positive. So for every dollar that people were given, it was more than $2 returned sort of in economic activity. So interesting, and of course something that the Yang campaign has been touting, Marshall.
So quick pushback on that. So one-time cash payment is the key phrase here, right? Universal basic income, whether you like it or not, is like a continual payment for a long time. So obviously, I think if it's a one-time payment, the inflationary effects aren't going to be the same sort of thing. Like, the question I have had answered is, if we just give everyone the money, like, why aren't apartment owners, renters just going to increase to meet that amount? That's the inflation thing people are concerned about when it comes to UBI.
Yeah.
And then secondly, I think that this is also like free money, but it's not coming from like Kenya. It's this is development aid. I think this is a great case for changing the way we develop Africa. I think this is a great way for changing the way that our current development system works. Like, we've spent literally almost billions of dollars in Africa, and there's been a lot of problems there. So I don't think this applies to the US.
See, that was my criticism of this one, which is, in Kenya or in Bangladesh it works too, but these are, completely cash-deprived societies.
They've done studies also in Canada. They've done pilot studies in the U.S., and they found the same thing, which is that, look, I think the inflationary impacts, I think that has to be further, I just don't think we have enough pilots to say for certain, and about the rent, I think that's a valid concern. However, we do see consistently that people don't just use the money money for like, whatever vices.
going
They
to
don't
buy a
just
new
like
car or whatever.
fritter it away. They invest it in themselves and their family. And it's a very paternalistic approach that we have right now to the welfare state of saying like, you can have this for food and only these kinds of foods. You can have this for housing, et cetera. What this says is basically like, here, we trust you. Make the best decisions. And what we've seen from study after study is that people actually do.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a Band-Aid for a much bigger problem when we talk about income inequality and kind of the poverty that our country has. And so while UBI may or may not be a good thing, what we really need to look at is kind of how our education system is broken, how our housing system is broken. And those things are really the contributing factors which put us in a position where we even have to debate whether we need UBI.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat, which is I know the Yang Gang is going to hate me for this, but I still think that so much of the so-called benefits of UBI, you can mitigate all the risk by incentivizing the exact same behavior in the tax code. And I just have not heard a good response to that.
And this is the other thing, Crystal, like, once again, you've made a great case for increasing cash support payments to the poor. That's not a universal program, right? So if we think that, like,
but here's the problem with that. This I feel very strongly about. The moment that you make something welfare, it gets destroyed politically. It always becomes something for those people. And it's also deeply degrading to have to go and prove your poverty to the government every year, every month, et cetera. The most successful programs in American history and really in world history are all universal. That's why Social Security is so popular. That's why Medicare is so popular. And so I think if you do a program like this, for it to have any sort of staying power, it has to be universal. And yes, look, the Michael Bloombergs of the world, they're going to pay way more in taxes than they're ever going to get out of a UBI, but still they will be bought in some small way into the program. I think that is absolutely essential.
I think it's a fair point from a political legitimacy argument. But yeah, anyway, we're not going to solve UBI today here.
So close.
You guys.
Interesting study, though. Guys, thank you.
It is.
Thank you.
Well, more rising for you after this.